In the last two videos, we explored the first title in the Uncharted series, Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. Now we move on to the next game, the next story, adventure, and of course, the next big treasure, the Chintamani Stone, and its home of Shambhala or Shangri-La. But much like we did with Drake's Fortune, we first have to take a look at the other treasures they can find along the way, the optional ones, the trinkets and knickknacks scattered around the levels that make up Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. There are a couple of big differences in this treasure exploration versus the one for the previous Uncharted entry. The first is that many of these items are religious in nature, related to Buddhism and Hinduism, where the iconography is pretty varied, even for a single entity. For example, there is a small trinket or statue of Ganesh in the game, and if you were to look at multiple such items online, you'd find that no two are alike, even the more ancient or traditional ones, so it's pretty impossible to give a one-to-one comparison to real-world sources in most cases. The other is that many of these items fall under multiple categories. An item might be Nepalese in origin, but there are also Tibetan or even general Asian examples. Plus, it may be related to Hinduism and Buddhism at the same time. So I've broken down the items into different categories of both national origin and theme. The categories are Deities, for items relating specifically to gods. China, for items with cultural ties to China, same with Nepal, Tibet, and India. There's Ottoman, relating to the Ottoman Empire. Temples and religion, items related to worship and rituals, and other for anything else that I couldn't identify or just falls into another category. Now, 3 more things I need to say before we jump into things. First is I'm not an expert on Buddhism or Hinduism or any religion for that matter, but I will do my best in my explanations and references. And while there are multiple branches of these two religions, including regional influences, I will do my best to focus specifically on Nepal and Tibet, as that's the context of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Second, I'm not including the strange relic, the Jak and Daxter Easter egg. It's in every game, so it's not worth bringing up again. And the last point is that while I've done my best to ensure proper pronunciation, I may butcher one or more along the way. I hope you'll forgive me. Let's kick things off with the fierce deities. If you've ever seen any Buddhist iconography or visited a temple, you'll likely have seen statues or other imagery of these angry-looking creatures, so scary that they may seem demons, but no, they are instead protectors of the Dharma, the road to enlightenment. The role of these wrathful deities is to destroy obstacles on that road to enlightenment. The wrathful deity statue in the game is a clear representation of one such entity. Which one this item represents is difficult to tell, as the image, even in-game, is not all that clear. Not to mention most wrathful or fierce deity images or figures include a fiery aura as part of the item, something this statue lacks, which makes me think that this may be a damaged item. But if I were to hazard a guess, based on the items the figure is carrying, I would say it's likely a representation of Bhairava, who in Hinduism is a manifestation of Shiva, one of the central deities of the religion. In Buddhism, they're a fierce deity, and in the context of Nepal, a figure commonly conflated with a very popular fierce deity called Mahakala, who is a wrathful manifestation of a Buddha, someone who has attained enlightenment. Think of it as someone who achieved the next level and then went on to protect the path for everyone else. Mahakala also has representation among the treasures, on the carved bone ornament. Other fierce deity items in Uncharted 2 are the clay deity head, which bears some resemblance to some Bhairava heads and masks, but looks closer to the Japanese Neo, the wrathful guardians of Buddhism, seen at some famous shrines. The wooden Vajrapani mask. Vajrapana is a fierce deity that represents the Buddha's power. There's the clay Yamantaka mask, Yamantaka being a fierce deity dubbed the conqueror of death. Yama and buffalo statue. Yama is the god of death in Hinduism, but is also a fierce deity in Buddhism, with a similar death god role plus acting as the judge of the dead. There's the ancient sword guard, which is of unclear origin. Could be Chinese, could be Tibetan, but it bears the image of a wrathful deity. There is an example of this very item in New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Tibetan trumpet, which bears a fierce deity's head as part of the design. Along with the fierce deities, we also have important Buddhist figures. First and most important, we have the Buddha, with a bronze Buddha statue. The gilded Bodhisattva statue depicts, as the name implies, a Bodhisattva, someone who has attained enlightenment. The gilt Tara statue represents the goddess Tara, who in Buddhism is a deity of arts and learning. The Sarasvati statue is related to this, as Sarasvati, a central Hindu goddess, is considered one of the 21 manifestations of Tara in Buddhism, and her role in the Hindu faith is very much the same, a patron of the arts, so to speak. The Newari bronze figures represent Nepalese worshippers, Newar being a Nepalese culture primarily living in the Kathmandu Valley, of which we see the city of Kathmandu in the game, the city filled with all the temples. If you look closely, this bronze figure has a little protrusion at the front, which is where the oil and wick would go. So this is not just a figure, it's a lamp. The bronze Cherazig statue represents the eponymous Cherazig, a bodhisattva of compassion, someone who represents the boundless compassion of all the Buddhas. And then there's the statue of Tsongkhapa, an influential Buddhist and founder of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. But of course, we also have members of the Hindu pantheon making an appearance. There's Ganesh, the elephant-headed god, son of Shiva, remover of obstacles, and is represented with a bronze Ganesh statue. Ganesh and his myth is very important in Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. The bronze Garuda is a depiction of the bird deity, king of all birds, and mount of the god Vishnu, the keeper of cosmic order and balance. Lastly, in this category, there's the bronze Varaha statue, representing the boar-headed avatar of Vishnu, and a figure that represents upholding or preserving order through sacrifice. But it's not just deities that come into play. As I mentioned, one of the categories is around worship and temples. So let's take a look at these items. Let's start with the Tokchak, amulets, which in Tibetan folklore are said to have fallen from the sky and contain some kind of magical protective power. They're primarily of a bronze alloy and come in all shapes and sizes, though primarily depicting what are called auspicious symbols, animals, deities, mantras, or even religious tools like the purba. In fact, one of the Tokchak found in Uncharted 2 is shaped as a purba, and a full version of the purba is in fact one of the story's MacGuffins, the passport to Shambhala. There's the Shiva amulet representing that Hindu deity. There's the Mani Jewel Tokchak, bearing the Triratna symbol, which represents the three jewels of Buddhism: the Buddha, the Dharma, aka the Path of Enlightenment, and the Sangha, the spiritual monastic community of Buddhism. The last religion-specific Tokchaks are the Mandala Tokchak, representing the universe, and part of both Buddhist and Hindu prayer, and the Trigram Tokchak, tied closely to both Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Taoism. Trigrams are intended to represent reality as a set of opposing forces that reinforce one another. Next up are what I like to call portable shrines, either small boxes containing prayers, herbs, and even religious icons, or small figures based on a real piece of architecture, like a monument or a temple. The former, the boxes, are commonly referred to as Gao pendants or amulets, and we have a few among the treasures: the worn pendant, the Tibetan square Gao, the antique Gao, and the Gao amulet Tokchak, which is something of a combo item. In the second type, monument and temple icons, we have the stupas, miniature versions of temples or monuments, seen in Uncharted 2 with a miniature bronze stupa and the bronze stupa ornament. Next up, we have prayer implements, and the first one is one that really threw me off, because the design in the game made me think it was some kind of Easter egg. Out of all the different items, it looks, cartoony, until I carefully read the name, and then that helped me look things up properly. And that item is the Amber Skull Bead. Look at the thing. But this item has a close tie to another treasure, the Tibetan mala beads, as there are examples of mala prayer beads where the beads are skull-shaped, the intent being that this version is for deep contemplation on the nature of life and death. The next one is a Tibetan prayer wheel, which you'll see in the game in their full versions, and of course, this being Uncharted, in the over-the-top super big climbable version. But the treasure is for the handheld prayer wheel, its surface covered with different prayers. Related is the singing bowl, And did you know this is also called an inverted bell? And then of course is the tiger bell. These are all used to aid in meditation and for different rituals. It's a similar thing for the skull-capped drum treasure, though curiously, this drum seems made of metal and is jeweled, where the name of the drum, skull-capped drum, is quite literal, as they're typically fashioned from the top of the skull, and this one seems to be a double skull drum, using two skull caps fastened together. Next up, we have pots and vessels, primarily to carry offerings. There's a Tibetan ritual vase, the silver offering pot, and the ancora, aka holy water vessel. There's the copper rice measuring cup for rice offers, an incense burner, and the oil lamp that Naughty Dog misspells as Deepa, even though it should really be Diya or Deepa. Yeah, I went hard on this on looking for proper pronunciation and the proper names of things. Sue me. Now, speaking of lamps, the bronze oil lamp treasure is another one of those items that seems to be damaged in some capacity, as lamps of this shape, from what I've been able to find, seem to also have a depiction of a deity under that arch, which is missing from this item. The last among these is the bronze altar spoon. It's a spoon. But just, it's a spoon for pouring different offerings. The next are ritual utensils, items directly related to some form of ritual. There's a bronze dorja, though the name Vajra might be more familiar to most, an item with a spherical center and two 5-pronged claws on the top and bottom. It represents indestructibility and is part of many Buddhist rituals, especially in Tantric Buddhism. In Hinduism, the Vajra is considered one of the most powerful weapons in reality. And I'll trade every gun in Nathan's possession for a Vajra. Speaking of weapons, we have the Tibetan ceremonial axe and the ritual blade. The axe representing spiritual transformation and the cutting off of worldly attachments, while the ritual blade, known as the karzika, is another symbolic item, also related to cutting certain things off, in this case, ignorance, ego, and all other obstacles on the path to enlightenment. The last of these treasures is a Tibetan conch shell, used to call for the start of ceremonies and to summon monks. Note to self, create a conch shell to summon D&D monks in my next campaign. The last few items I really couldn't group up that well. First up are the bronze lions, normal and antique, which are temple guardians, standing outside. The Cham lion mask, on the other hand, is used in the performance of Buddhist parables. The jeweled statue crown looks a lot like a diadem, a crown usually worn by monks or priests in the performance of their duties, but it's also seen on the heads of various Buddhist and Hindu deities and their iconography. And speaking of crown, there's the ritual crown, one of many such items dubbed Vajra crowns, carried by the highest of priests in the Nepalese Buddhist community. Before we jump onto another bigger category, let's take care of the item classified under Other, the Bhutanese lime box, which is used to store chewing lime, aka fermented betel nut, which is, well, a psychoactive drug. Another quick item to get through is the ivory chess treasure, which is from India, the birthplace of chess. I bet you didn't know that, but yeah, chess was conceived in India during the reign of the Gupta Empire, between the 3rd and 6th century. This was a new one for me. I had always thought chess was a European game. I stand corrected. Now onto the regional items, and the majority of these are just day-to-day items and jewelry, so there's not that much to say about them, but I will highlight a few pieces here and there. Let's start off with China. There are several treasures with direct links to China, specifically the Yuan dynasty that ruled after the country was invaded and conquered by Mongols, specifically Kublai Khan, the Khan that Marco Polo interacted with. And that relationship is central to at least the opening chapters of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Of the Chinese items, which include a jar, coin, helmet, and even a censer, the highlights are the jade chimeras, which were protective talismans. There's also an item called the Jade Pei Pendant, which I'm mentioning only because it's kinda redundant. Yu Pei is a generic catch-all term in Mandarin for jade pendants, with Yu being jade and Pei being the term for pendant. So this is kind of a case of the Sahara Desert or non-bread. Jade Pei Pendant is essentially Jade Pendant. Another interesting item from these is the Mongol Paisa Passport, which is a badge given to dignitaries and envoys so they could requisition goods and services from the populace while traveling on their official duties. Lastly, there are 3 items that don't match up with anything Yuan dynasty related, and it took me a while and some long searches to even determine that they were of Chinese origin, and they're the unusual bronze mask, the bronze statue head, and the gold leaf statue head, which have very unique designs, so much so that, like the amber bead, I thought they were Easter eggs, but no, they're the products of the Saixingdui people of ancient China, a culture that settled in the ancient kingdom of Shu. If you've played the game Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, you'll know the Shu kingdom has a big part to play in that game's story and lore. The unusual mask with the protruding eyes is a representation of the legendary first king of Shu, Kan Kong, and the bronze heads are very much iconic Saixingdui artifacts. I would recommend looking at the Wikipedia entry for the Saixingdui, as it has quite a few photos of their cultural artifacts, and some of them are impressive in their scale. I'll add the link to the description. Moving from China, we head to Nepal next. Of these items, which include a tokchak bearing the image of an animal and a small bird-shaped lamp, the notable items are the wooden gura, used to hold a churning rod when making butter. It's kind of fun. I found that very interesting. The 9-jewel ring, also known as Navaratna, a ring with 9 auspicious gems: ruby, pearl, coral, emerald, yellow and blue sapphires, found out there were yellow sapphires, diamond, hessonite, and cat's eye. And lastly, the Lakhi mask, a demon mask representing a figure in Nepalese folklore said to have once been forest demons before becoming protectors of mankind. From Nepal, we go to their neighbor, Tibet, and there are a fair number of them, but they're also the ones more closely related to everyday living. There are rings, snuff boxes, there are always snuff boxes in these games, a lighter, a knife, hair and dress ornaments or clasps, and another tokchak, this one in the shape of a bell. The notable items are the yak horn, which was used to store herbs, the silver needle case, an item used to store sewing needles. Though given the size, for a moment, I thought they were for acupuncture needles instead, but that wasn't the case. The fibula tokchak, fibula in this instance meaning cloak pin. The 8 emblem pendant bearing the 8 auspicious symbols in Buddhism, collectively known as the Ashtamangala. The parasol, the white conch shell, the 2 golden fish, the endless knot, the precious vase, the victory banner, the lotus flower, and the 8-spoked wheel. This is a combo item like no other. Lastly, a very sturdy-looking silver seal for stamping documents. To end this, we have the Ottoman items. We have a coin, a pipe, bracelets, a ring, and even a belt buckle. But the most notable items for me are the antique pocket watch, and it's curious because if you look closely, it doesn't bear Roman numerals, but instead Turkish number. There's the glass evil eye, said to protect against evil spirits, a belief that started in ancient Mesopotamia but spread all the way to the Ottomans. And the last item is the silver amulet box. Literally that, a silver box to hold your other amulets. It's bling to hold your bling, which is kind of awesome. And with that, we finished this look at the optional treasures found across the adventure that is Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. If I made a mistake with any of these items, please do let me know in the comments. And if this look at these historical artifacts makes you want to go and learn a bit more about these cultures on your own, hey, then I've done my job. Come back next time as we join Elena, Nathan, and some dubious characters, a maniacal warlord, and his clone armies on the hunt for the Chintamani Stone and the forgotten city of Shambhala in Uncharted 2 Among Thieves.